upon a time, there was a kid who wanted to help people in need. Every day, he explored new ways to make a difference. One day, he watched missionary doctors care for patients in rural India. Because of that, he decided to become a doctor himself. Because of that, he learned anatomy and medicine, until finally he learned how to fix broken bones. And ever since that day, he has felt grateful to help people heal.
Welcome to A Life Worth Working, a podcast about how we get to the soul of work.
We're your hosts, Dana Allen Walsh and Michelle Weiss. I'm the senior pastor of a progressive church, and Michelle is a writer on the future of education and work.
And as always, we love hearing your comments, questions, and thoughts. So please know you can email us at any time at hello@alifeworthworking.com.
Please make sure you subscribe to our show, give it all the stars, and share it with your friends and loved ones who may be searching for more meaning in their work lives.
In this episode, we chat with Dr. Todd Kim, an orthopedic surgeon in Northern California. Todd's path to becoming a surgeon was anything but linear. When he was in high school, he was really struck by the example of his senior pastor, and it shaped who he thought he wanted to be when he grew up.
When I was in high school, I was very involved with our church. I remember the senior pastor at the church that my whole family went to. He was just a great example of someone I really looked up to him. The impact that he had on people, not just on Sunday mornings from the pulpit, but throughout the week. I saw him interacting with people and how he cared for people. And I remember always thinking that was pretty cool and exciting. So I definitely had considered going into some type of ministry and was always excited about overseas stuff as well. So we knew some family friends who had done some missionary work overseas. So that always was something I had thought about. I also did have the example with my father and grandfather who were physicians. And so I think I always had also thought that was another thing I would consider. And I think at the time, to me, they sort of were very similar in my mind in terms of, both examples of ways that you can really help people in need. That's sort of where I felt a calling or a draw.
Todd went to college and held both ideas as possibilities in his head, serving in ministry, especially overseas, and potentially going into medicine. So he took a lot of religion and philosophy classes, while also trying to take care of some of those challenging pre-med requirements, just in case.
The summer before his junior year in college, he joined a mission trip to a state in southern India that was mostly Christian. It was really his first time overseas, and he remembers the intensity of the experience, the people, the culture, the religions. His group followed an Indian couple, both doctors, who served in this rural region.
They had a small hospital. It was the only hospital in the area. And it was just amazing, the work that they did. The husband did a lot of cataract surgery. I remember assisting, kind of helping in the operating room as he was doing cataract surgery and seeing patients going home a day or two later who could see, which was pretty amazing. The wife was doing mostly OBGYN work, and she was the only woman doctor in a huge area. The impact she had was just amazing. So I remember that experience. The things that stood out to me as one, being in such a different place with what I could sense, even though I still I knew very little about India and its history, and I knew very little about Hinduism, but I could sense that I really didn't know much about it. I could sense that, I can't speak these people's language. You could kind of tell when you're out in the village, people have been living like this for a long time. And I really didn't feel like telling them about my experience or my faith was really necessarily relevant to them. It sort of felt a little off. And then when I saw the doctors I was working with, I really felt like, hey, this is something that the skills that they have, whether it's cataract surgery or other types of care, medical or surgical, this is something that can kind of go across these boundaries. It's something that can go, regardless of language, culture, history, religion. It's something that still can be relevant to help people. And I think for me, where I was at that time, that really crystallized that that going into medicine was going to be the best fit for me, and where I felt like I felt most comfortable in terms of trying to make a difference or help people.
It's so powerful, your core value of wanting to serve and help others, and the way that you were discerning what is the path, that I want to pursue. And then it feeling like you use that word crystallized around the path of medicine, being able to transcend boundaries, like those boundaries of nationality, religion, and how powerful that still that core desire to serve and to help others.
After that pivotal experience, Todd went all in on his medical courses and preparing to apply to med school. But at the same time, he immersed himself in small seminars about Hinduism and Buddhism, shifting the focus of his religious studies.
And he later returned to India for an entire year before going to med school. Through a college friend who was also traveling around India, he ended up volunteering at Mother Teresa's Kaligat home for the dying destitutes in Calcutta, India.
It's right within actually the temple complex of one of the busiest temples, Hindu temples in the city. It's a bit of a surreal experience as you walk to volunteer. You go from the sort of outskirts of the temple where they're selling lots of things for people who are coming to worship, and you sort of get closer and closer. And then literally within the outer temple walls is where Mother Teresa has this home. It's for men and women of all faiths. Of course, the nuns, the sisters who are doing most of the work are Catholic, but they have patients, Christian, Hindu, majority Hindu, but Hindu, Muslim, and Christian. And I remember whenever a patient did pass away, they would make sure to give the patient the rites that they would want according to their faith and their tradition. So we would sometimes go to take patients for cremation, some for burial, things like that. So it was a pretty intense experience. I think that the realization you have of the impact that Mother Teresa had. I mean, I just imagining this short Albanian woman convincing the Hindu priests leaders to give her a part of their temple to do her work.
That's right.
It's kind of hard to imagine how she did that, but she did.
Yeah.
And you got to meet her, right?
I did. I remember she had the strongest handshake, really firm, strong handshake. And again, just this positive and really just joyful personality. I feel so fortunate because that was just, I think, about 2 years before she died. So we really, it was a fortunate opportunity to get to meet her, but it was intense. She prayed for us, like for everyone. And I remember her hand on my head felt very, very, really strong hand for a little lady.
Wow. That's so powerful.
So I think this speaks to one of her really cool principles that I would have never guessed before going there, which is she talked about so much of the work is for the poor and with the poor, but she also had a ministry to those who are not poor. And that ministry was to always, in all of her homes, all the sisters, missionaries of charity sites, they are always open to volunteers. And I can tell you that having volunteers does not necessarily help with the work most of the time, right?
Yes.
As you can imagine, right? Having volunteers from all over the world show up clueless and wanting to help does not necessarily make the sisters' work day easier. But I really think that was sort of her and their ministry to those of us who aren't poor to allow us to take part in the work. And she really prioritized that. So in Calcutta at the time, there were multiple missionaries of charity homes. I think there were probably 3 or 4 at the time. And there was the main home where all of the sisters lived. I think it was called Mother House. And so there was a mass every morning there, probably at like 5:30, 6 in the morning. And so many of us as volunteers would go for the early morning mass before going to volunteer. I remember Mother Teresa always sat in the sort of back corner next to the volunteers. So she was literally a few feet away from us. And anytime any volunteer, needed something, like didn't have a rosary or something, she would like start throwing them at people, or if you were sitting next to her, she would like tap you on the shoulder and tell you to go pass them out. She was very accessible to the volunteers, which I thought was, in retrospect, is pretty amazing given everything that she was doing at the time.
Mm.
What did you learn from Mother Teresa and from that experience in India?
Wow. Honestly, it's sort of humbling even to think about this example, and not just, of course, Mother Teresa, who led and started this, but so many of the sisters that I worked side by side with during that time, how they just really had, I almost would describe it as sort of a love affair with this work of serving people in need. I mean, this was really their passion. And of course, the personal sacrifice. But I think what I probably took from it the most was the joy that they had. If you describe this home where we were volunteering, it could sound like a pretty depressing place, definitely a very intense place, which it was. And yet the joy that was there, when you see these sisters, walking around, whether they're bathing a patient, whether they're mopping the floor, when we were cooking, I was helping with laundry. I mean, the smiles and the joy that came from them really, I think, had a huge impact on me, and of course, have a huge impact on those that they were helping.
That's so powerful. You know, most people wouldn't connect joy to a place where people are dying and where there is such incredible poverty. And then where you have this mix of volunteers who are also another probably burden on the whole system. So I can completely see how that there was such a lesson there for you or for anyone experiencing joy amidst those circumstances.
During his days in medical school, Todd had a problem. He loved everything he was trying in his clinical rotations.
You guys probably know this sort of format of medical school. The first couple years, you're basically in class all the time. I'll be honest, I really didn't have an idea what I wanted to do. And really it wasn't that I didn't like anything, but it was that I liked everything. I mean, everything seemed interesting, exciting. But I definitely, as I went through my rotations, I loved my surgery rotation. I just loved it. And I think I was sort of trying to suppress that excitement because it wasn't exactly the path I was expecting. But I was open to different fields. And as you get into your fourth year of medical school, typically you sort of pick your specialty and then you do rotations in your fourth year that are relevant to that specialty and also that set you up to get letters of recommendation, et cetera. So you kind of start to focus during your fourth year. Many times people focus even earlier doing research projects and stuff, focus in a certain field. But my fourth year, I was a mess. I was all over the place. I took rotations in surgery, general surgery, orthopedics, cardiology, emergency medicine. Like I was doing kind of everything. And in the end, I had a really hard time deciding. I mean, this was, I would say, a difficult time because you're kind of supposed to know what you want to do. And I ended up applying in two different fields. So, which is not very common. So I applied and interviewed for residency spots in general surgery and surgery, as well as in internal medicine. My thought at the time was in internal medicine, I was interested in becoming a cardiologist. So I interviewed in both fields, which sometimes is a little tricky because if you're interviewing at the same institution in two different subspecialties, you gotta sort of sneak out of the tour. When they want to give you a tour, you got to be careful. You may run into people from the other department when you're on the tour.
Why were you suppressing surgery? Was it something to do with like prestige or reputation? Like, why were you not wanting to kind of go all in on the surgery front?
It's a good question. I don't know why. I mean, in retrospect, it seems kind of obvious if you're really excited about something. And I was naive, I think, in retrospect, but it didn't seem maybe as relevant to sort of some of the overseas work and stuff that I had seen. And also, it's pretty intense. The residency training in surgery is pretty intense. So I think I was sort of trying to decide what was most important to me in terms of life and work, and also how my training would connect with this overseas work that I think I still wanted to have as a part of my work in some capacity.
Todd ended up matching to a residency in internal medicine. He's probably one of the few orthopedic surgeons who did 2 years of internal medicine before switching over to surgery. Throughout those long and difficult 2 years, he started to feel a growing sense of unease.
Trudging through his internship, he found himself envying the surgeons and really wanting to be with them. When he took an away rotation in Honduras, he spent every single minute in the operating room.
All of a sudden, the internship year, I was not in the operating room at all. And I really realized that I missed it. And that sort of uneasiness sort of grew over months. And I remember actually a really pivotal day when I just realized that I could still change. It was weird. It was like this weight was lifted off of me. And I remember it was just like the one day, because you never think you're going to make a change like that. It's not in the plan. But I can't remember who I had a conversation with, but I remember getting home and thinking, you know what? I can change. I can apply. I can just start over and apply in another field. And I felt happier and just more relaxed and sort of like this weight off. I think the weight of feeling like I had made the wrong decision.
I hear what you're saying, that you had this slow growing uneasiness, but then there was one day in which kind of that light bulb goes off of, there can be some freedom here. There can be a more expansive way to look at the future. And then you've harnessed your courage to kind of step into what might be possible next.
One thing I've thought about is one of my, I think, sort of strengths and weaknesses. I think that's how it is for a lot of us. There's characteristics that can be strengths and weaknesses. Is that I'm very enthusiastic and excited about lots of things. So whether I was a medical student, I loved all my rotations. So I wasn't as focused. And that was a challenge, to end up sort of really being able to focus and decide what was the best fit for me. And I think so. And in some ways I felt like I was indecisive. I saw other med students who, like, from the first day of medical school, they're like, I'm going to be, I'm going to be a cardiologist, or I'm going to be an orthopedic surgeon, or whatever it is. And they just went straight through, and it seemed more efficient and less stressful to just know what you're going to do. So I sort of struggle with that. At the same time, I'll say that the experiences that I've had, I do think have made me a better orthopedic surgeon. And there's things that, having really, really done, 2 years of training in internal medicine, I don't remember much of the specifics of that medicine now, but I did learn a lot about caring for patients and understanding when a patient is sick, and also some of the other aspects of medicine that in surgery we in the past haven't focused on. So, the surgical fields, as you can imagine, have typically spent most of their time and energy focusing on the technical sort of aspects of surgery. Other fields like internal medicine have also probably earlier really started to think about some of the more human aspects of medicine. I mean, we know now that, there's a lot of psychological aspects, and the mind affects the body, and we still don't understand it. But these other areas of communication and empathy, how you connect with patients, does make a difference. We know that. But that wasn't a focus as much in surgical fields in the past. And so I do think that different experiences, even though it was kind of painful to sort of be indecisive and go through that journey, in some ways, all of that is a part of who I am as an orthopedic surgeon now.
That's really neat. I think one of the things, you're talking about people who just knew what they wanted to do. There is something really enviable about that, right? They just know and they're following through. And I wish I could just know clearly that this is the thing. But what you're talking about, and I think the negative version of it is I was indecisive, or I could be viewed as indecisive, but you were also kind of just more of a generalist, right? You just were enthusiastic about a lot of things. And then, as you said, it helped you become who you are. But I can imagine when you were making that decision, even though you felt kind of a moment of release knowing you could change, did you ever sort of think like, oh, what will other people think? Or, is this sunk costs? Was this a waste of time? Like in the moment, do you remember having these worries?
Well, absolutely. I mean, when I realized that I was going to get to do a second internship year, that definitely was not something I was excited about. And the second one being a lot harder than the first one because the internship typically is pretty intense in terms of hours. It almost feels like a waste, right? Like I spent 2 years doing internal medicine and now I'm starting over. Like, certainly in retrospect, I don't see those 2 years as a waste at all. I learned a ton. At the same time, though, in terms of that sort of traditional trajectory of you go from college to med school to residency, and then at a certain age, you start your job, you finish your training. Certainly in terms of that more traditional trajectory, it was not the best plan and not the most efficient way to get there for sure.
Yeah. When we released that, the top value being efficiency, what I hear is there was such good learning and you are a different surgeon as a result of that experience, which is so powerful for people when they're trying to make a shift and feeling like, oh, all this is going to be wasted or the starting over feels too hard, to recognize there could be some really excellent growth that could actually change the future too. And so I'm curious about, when you look ahead, what are the ways you want to grow in your work or as a person doing this work?
Yeah. So first thing I wanted to say, which is relevant to this, but also follow up from earlier, is one of the areas that I want to really refocus on is being involved in teaching sort of around the world. What I learned after I got into orthopedic surgery is that the skills as an orthopedic surgeon are probably the most relevant skills that I could have if I want to go to the countries, these low and middle income countries, and teach or help. So, and this is something we've learned over the past, decade or so, is that the death, the mortality, and the burden of disease, the disability, if you look at that from traumatic injuries, mostly from, road traffic accidents, is much higher than all the infectious diseases combined. Okay, so, and there's very few surgical specialists. So there's a real need for training and teaching in those areas. And so that was not something that I knew when I decided to switch to orthopedic surgery, but it's been amazing for me. And earlier in my career, I really had opportunities to be involved with that teaching and orthopedic surgery in a lot of different places. I think since COVID and some small children, I haven't been as involved and focused in that. But one thing I'd really like to get back into is not just the overseas work, but now with the capacities to do remote teaching, there's opportunities to teach and be involved even from your own office or from your own living room. And so that's one area that I want to put more energy into, is getting back involved with the organization that I've worked with. It's called Health Volunteers Overseas. The cool thing is their focus is on teaching and capacity building. So as you can imagine, if I go in 1 week, I could do maybe, 10, 20 surgeries in a week and impact that many patients. But if I go and teach some local orthopedic surgeons about how to care for those patients, the impact obviously is multiplied. And so the focus is really on teaching. So that's one thing that I really would want to get back into, but I think in a different way than I have in the past.
I love how full circle that comes, and really getting back to where your sense of call and purpose came from in your work in India. That's powerful. She's Michelle Weiss.
And she's Dana Allen Walsh.
This has been another episode of A Life Worth Working.
Don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends and loved ones who may also be searching for purpose and meaning in their work lives, or what we call the soul of work.